Brothers and rock bands goes together like water and oil, if we're being honest. Enter the Kinks, formed by brothers Ray and Dave Davies, rock and roll legends, pioneers, and also ones to never say no to a little scuffle. On an evening in 1965 at Cardiff's Capitol Theatre in Wales, the Kinks, stunningly enough not to the fault of the two siblings, would find themselves in the middle of their most infamous onstage fight of their career. Just the night before, tensions between the band had gotten a little out of hand. After slamming back a few drinks, guitarist Dave Davies was intoxicated, and he started throwing around insults, but mainly aiming them at drummer Mick Avery. And let's just say, like the two brothers themselves, Avery was not the one who was going to just sit back and let things slide. He was pissed. However, at the end of that night, he decided just to let his anger simmer, and was waiting for the perfect moment to try and get Dave back. Fast forward now to the next night. The Kinks had just kicked off their set at Cardiff when Dave Davies, intoxicated by that point as well, decided again to poke fun at Avery. Now, it should be known that Davies was completely unaware that Avery was planning anything or was even still mad from the night before about the insults. Reportedly, Dave turned to Avery on stage and said, "Why don't you get your member out and start playing the snare drum with that? It'll probably sound better." Yeah, that was not going to fly with Avery. Fueled now by a mix of anger and, of course, alcohol, the drummer leaped from his seat and delivered a punch that landed Dave Davies crashing to the stage floor. Shocked and unable to defend himself, Dave really did take quite a hit. The audience was left in absolute shock too, as they were watching this entirely unfold in front of them. So Dave Davies is now lying there, unconscious on stage, while the band and crew are scrambling around to figure out what the heck just happened. Dave was quickly rushed to Cardiff Royal Infirmary, where he actually received a total of 16 stitches for his injuries. Meanwhile, Mick Avery, who thought he had just committed a murder, decided to go and hide, and he bolted from the venue, fearing the consequences. The police would find him almost immediately, and Avery even tried to convince the cops that it wasn't him. It was no use, as clearly hundreds of people had just seen what happened on stage. So the next day, as the dust settles from the incident, Dave Davies actually decides to drop all charges, possibly out of consideration for his friend, or possibly just to save the band. Regardless, things between the band on a personal and professional level were just never the same. As a result of the altercation at the Capitol Theatre, the American Federation of Musicians banned the Kinks from touring in North America for 4 years. Unfortunately for the band, this meant they really couldn't get a grip on the continent the entire time they were touring together. Ray Davies spoke years later in 2010 reflecting on that night, saying, "In many respects, that ridiculous band took away the best years of the Kinks. We came about in the first days after Beatlemania, got chased everywhere we went, we were battlers. But the very thing that makes a band special is ultimately what causes it to break up. What made our music interesting was the very thing that destroyed it." While this particular incident didn't involve the two brothers, the history of the Kinks is filled with tension, rivalry, and honestly, just anger. Could the Kinks have actually reached the echelons of Beatlemania and the heights the Beatles had in the States if they were allowed to tour here? I don't know. It'll forever be impossible to have that answer. But the story does beg the question, what if? Lack of respect for one another, inability to put ego aside, that is why the Kinks sucked as bandmates.